There was a lot to unpack with this week's readings. I must have re-recorded this video 5 times. Last night I decided I was going to reread the readings one more time, and this time when I read Nadia Al-Musa's paper, I decided to read the entire thing from the beginning instead of just the section assigned, so I could kind of get an idea of her mindset. And I was particularly struck by a quote on the very first page of her paper, and I'll read it to you. Quote, "By the end of my post-secondary studies, I felt that I was not sufficiently proficient," end quote. She indicates feeling inadequate in her abilities upon graduation and that she was not well enough prepared to go off into the working world. In this case, she's referring to the software AutoCAD. But I feel like this feeling can be applied to just about any student in any program at any level entering into the workforce. And she goes on to finish the quote by saying, "As a result, I had to learn more detail on my own and further explore the latest technological trends used in the profession. This self-directed learning sparked my interest in teaching." So let's look at some of the key components of that sentence. I had to learn on my own, self-directed, sparked my interest in teaching. In Module 1, we are asked to examine the 5 curriculum philosophies identified by Eisner and Valence in 1974 and answer the following 2 questions. 1, why some orientations have endured while others not so much? And 2, how have we incorporated some of these into our own teaching approaches? So as we dive into the wacky world of curriculum, I need a definition. I work on definitions. So I think we need to at first agree on what we mean by the word curriculum, at least how it pertains to education for our purposes here in this module. Ornstein and Hunkins defines curriculum as, quote, "a field of study crucial to the health of schools and societies." Sounds reasonable, right? But then they continue on in the very next sentence to say that curriculum, in fact, cannot be defined because it is, at best, elusive, fragmentary, and confusing. I think that's about as definitive as a definition we're going to get. So let's move on. You all know that I'm a tech teacher, and I was immediately drawn to the curriculum of technology sections in the readings first. So I was felt very kin to that. I'm also a kinesthetic learner, and I've always been skewed to that type of thinking. And as a result, that's how I teach. I teach in small little increments and then say, go do it. And then we continue on like that, right? So in my About Me blog, I also mentioned that had I had other options for learning, I may have been a better economic student, but here we are, right? So after I completed my first formal undergraduate degree, I did go on to teach myself how to be a photographer, a graphic artist, and the entire Adobe suite, among other things. In other words, I have a bias towards technology. Bias. Remember that word, because we're going to come back to that later. McNeil in his 2009 paper says that the characteristics of the self-directed learner include capacity for innovation and openness. These self-directed learned skills would later lead me to become a technology teacher as a second career. It's the same path Al-Musa took after she graduated. She self-taught herself the skills she needed, in this case the technology of AutoCAD, because she felt that she was not sufficiently proficient, and she was inspired to pay it forward by becoming a teacher. So remember that as we go on. So now that we have this definition-ish of curriculum, let's take a quick look at the 5 conceptions of curriculum that Eisner and Valence examined in 1974, Valence re-examines in 1986, and all the readings that we did are all based upon these 5 core orientations. So for the purpose of discussion for the rest of this video, I'm going to quickly read direct quotes. Cognitive process is concerned with the sharpening the intellectual process and developing of cognitive skills, so thinking, right? Curriculum of technology aims to use technology to communicate knowledge and facilitate learning by focusing on the presentation of material to the learner rather than on the learner. Academic rationalism, which I think is the most traditional of the 5, states that classic disciplines should be taught in the curriculum since they enable individuals to learn concepts through which thought acquires precision, generality, and power. Thank God I'm reading this off a teleprompter because that is a mouthful. Self-actualization, which was revised by Valence in 86 to read as personal success and personal commitment to learning, so ownership of learning, but essentially it saw that the learner was on a journey of self-discovery. Social reconstruction seeks to provide the tools to enable the individual to survive and function effectively in an unstable and changing world. Right? So regardless of which of these orientations that any of us lean towards, for example, I tend to lean towards technology, there's little doubt, in my mind at least, that human bias has played a significant role. Content that is presented to students under the umbrella of curriculum is written by humans. Choosing a curriculum orientation or a pedagogy is an opinion that is influenced by other opinions, such as teachers' college, right? Teacher-student, teacher-student. Therefore, curriculum philosophies must be, at least in my view, influenced by the current social climate that impact educators, or as the Gen Z kids like to say on TikTok, what's trending. I feel it's important to include bias in the discussion because the curriculum content creators, or as Shiro calls them, people who work on curriculum, right, are the ones who decide what is relevant or not, what gets included or not, what stays, what goes, how is it presented, like new math. Someday, somebody please explain to me new math. And the standards that the students must adhere to in order to graduate. So why have some of these theories endured the test of time, others not so much? It's a great question. So these 5 philosophies have been agreed upon by the who's who in curriculum. Curriculum writers generally agree that the 5 curriculum conceptions, orientations, capture the essence of contemporary thought. So what happened? Remember, curriculum is elusive, fragmentary, and confusing, and things change all the time. For example, in 1987, I sat in a typing class. Today, my kids ask me, "Miss, what's a typewriter?" I feel the social reconstruction curriculum may have gained a lot of attention during the advent of the social justice movement in the 60s and 70s. I'm that old. I remember my teachers talking about this stuff in our classrooms. This curriculum is based on the principles of relating education and students to social context and social change for the greater good. During the advent of social justice, I imagine that this philosophy would have been very attractive for curriculum writers, being influenced by what was happening around them because the entire era was steeped in activism, right? Perhaps social reconstruction, however, is too liberal in orientation and would have fallen out of favor as Western society has moved more towards a conservative mindset. Self-actualization curriculums still do exist in Canada, such as Montessori schools and many private schools where parents may prefer a program that fosters an education of as a journey of self-discovery. I also feel like it is steeped in some of the newer pedagogy philosophies that have come out recently. Again, though, as we move towards the 21st century learner and a more conservative mindset, this curriculum, I'm not sure, will stand the test of time in the greater context, perhaps in smaller private funded pockets, or again, as teacher pedagogies as opposed to a curriculum. In the case of publicly funded education, where the luxury of private funding and autonomy is not the case, and where I work, we have stakeholders, right? So we have politicians, trustees, principals, teachers, parents, and in the Ontario Catholic Education Board, where I work, bishops. And they make up the We Say So company. That's a Gen X reference of what is known as publicly funded education, and where the majority of Canada students find themselves Monday through Friday. In this situation, the enduring philosophy, in my opinion, then is academic rationalism, right? Perhaps with some modifications as it moves along to keep it relevant, but the core philosophy stays the same, a cultural accumulated knowledge that is passed on down the line, teacher to student, parent to kid, so on. I feel that the cognitive process and technology that I'm not going to touch too much upon is being incorporated into the public funding education model, at least in Ontario. That's how I see it. And most of the curriculum, I feel, is still very much steeped in academic rationalism. There's comfort in what we know, right? There's comfort in the known. So to answer the question why some conceptions remain while others have not, there's like this real ebb and flow. I agree with Al Musa that it has to do more with modern Western society thinking. So core subjects like math, reading and writing, vocational and technology courses, as well as the self-care courses such as health and gym, in our minds are what makes a well-rounded student. Well, who decided that? When was that decided? How was it decided? How did the collective we say, yep, you know what, that's what a graduate looks like? And why do we keep perpetuating that generation after generation? Who makes up the we say so company? In the end, the graduate that crosses the stage at the end of their 12-year ride through elementary and high school on their way to work, college, or university, therefore, is a direct result of this curriculum philosophy. And then those that go to college and university will take on that philosophy. And has been determined to be fluent in this accumulated knowledge before being granted their diploma. They have spent their time learning this bank of knowledge in a sequential instruction model in the hopes of being a contributing member of society. It's true. An engineer needs to first be a student in university that wants to build bridges for a living. But before that, in high school, he needed to learn the Pythagorean theorem. But before that, he needed to learn how to add and subtract in primary school. And it just keeps building. And that's what we mean by sequential learning. Things change. Nowadays, there are options such as specialized diplomas that allow students to be a bum in a seat while they pursue a potential passion so that they can still get a diploma because society has said you need a GED to get a job. Academic rationalism is a conservative approach, on the other hand. It is steeped in Western culture. Its emphasis is imparting our societal accumulated knowledge and opinions onto our learners. Today, in 2023, I feel that those two other conservative orientations that Valence describes, cognitive process thinking and curriculum of technology, have been fairly well amalgamated into the academic rationalism model. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job. But as McNeill says, quote, there are still the traditional goals, standards, programs, and instructional materials used to provide a measurable curriculum. But the delivery of that material is the role of the teacher, and the teacher chooses the pedagogy that they're going to use to teach it. And although we may still have a conservative academic orientation, we now have access to a variety of pedagogies that we can employ in order to deliver the material. So in my case, for example, let's talk about yearbook class. I can use both a curriculum of technology, but also a pedagogy of caring to deliver what the Ministry of Education mandated that I need to teach them and they need to learn by the end of the semester. How have I incorporated some of this into my own teaching approaches? I use the curriculum every day, in fact, as a communications technology teacher. Let's stay with yearbook class, for example. The students are required to do two things. They're required to work collaboratively to produce a book, and they need to call upon a myriad of skills that they've already learned along the way. For example, journalists. They must use their knowledge of English from English class, research skills, interviewing, compositional essay writing, etc. Photographers need to know graphic arts, computer skills, compositional rules, and technical skills. They need to know the difference between photographing a sporting event versus a portrait. And editors must use managerial skills as well as creative skills to put it all together and make this cohesive, professional, published book that has thousands of dollars in the form of student fees and in some cases sponsorship and advertising invested in it. The stakes are high and the pressure on these kids is real. I tell them at the beginning of every year that they will leave a piece of their soul on every page, but the lessons that they learned they will never forget. So what about Al-Musa being inspired to become a teacher because she graduated somehow feeling that she wasn't prepared for the workplace? Sound familiar? That's why we need educators who take courses like 810, because curriculum is elusive, fragmentary, and confusing. What does it mean? It means that we care a whole lot. The system isn't perfect. But as McNeil says, and this is my favorite quote out of all the readings, the teacher provides warmth and nurtures emotions while continuing to function as a resource and facilitator. We read a whole lot about the how versus the what. So maybe curriculum is the what, but the instructor is the how. Something to think about. Have an awesome day.